So our next speaker is one of three that's coming from out of the Bay Area, I would say. Please welcome me, Rebecca Sage Allen, all the way from Burbank, who will be presenting on stakeholder engagement for plastic waste reduction initiatives. Working with Recreate Waste Collaborative, as a recycling specialist too, Rebecca conducts outreach and education on both SB 1383 edible food recovery and plastic waste reduction regulations. With a background in team building, education, and entertainment, Rebecca is passionate about engaging stakeholders and building community while assisting jurisdictions with important environmental regulations. Welcome to the stage, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to discuss the work our team at Recreate did assisting both Burbank and Glendale, California with outreach and education as they proposed some plastic waste reduction regulations. But first, I think you know where I'm going because you saw the slide. Let's go all the way back to 79 AD. Next slide, please. Years ago, I was able to visit Pompeii. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. Push the button. Yay, okay, great. But in case you are not familiar with it, in 79 AD, just flag me if I'm not there. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted and basically encased all of Pompeii under ash. It preserved life as it was back then. And there's so many amazing things to see there. We took a guided tour, and everyone on the tour hated me. And I will tell you why. We saw so many fascinating things, artwork, frescoes, and of course, these human bodies encased in ash. I mean, absolutely fascinating. But all I wanted to talk about the whole time was this. This is called a thermopolium, and it is the original takeout. It was fast food. It was the original fast food, and it totally fascinated me. And we saw it earlier on the tour, so no matter where we went, I kept raising my hand, being like, let's talk more about that fast food. Was there a deposit system? How would they get it back? What did they serve food in? So now, no matter where I went, I kept badgering everybody. And these types of food stalls are really common in Rome. They've discovered about 80 of them in Pompeii. They used bronze bowls, ceramic jars, and flasks to serve food. So surely if they could serve food back in Pompeii in 79 AD with no electricity, running water, or styrofoam, of course, we could do it today, right? Well, you would think. So let's fast forward 2,000 years and take a look at two different communities that were attempting to pass regulations. One successful, one unfortunately not successful. I'm going to share with you the data and the process used from these two cities that neighbor each other. Each one conducted outreach essentially to pass the exact same law. So if you're a city looking to pass one of these laws, our goal is that you learn from these case studies and some of the lessons that we learned. Our teams were engaged in the cities of Burbank and Glendale as they tried to introduce this legislation. You can see we are right in LA County. Burbank and Glendale are right next to each other. Some fun facts about each city. Demographics are pretty similar. Glendale has a little bit of a bigger population. Fun fact, they have the biggest Armenian community outside of Armenia. Burbank, they make a little bit more money, but demographically, relatively the same. Both cities border each other. So their goal was to keep the legislation very similar because we share such a strong commerce back and forth, even residents back and forth, that they wanted to make sure the regulations were very similar. So for the regulations, as you can see, they both proposed to have reusables for takeout, reusables for dine-in. I wish reusables for takeout. Compostables for takeout, a 25-cent cup fee for single-use beverage containers, and a ban on expanded and rigid polystyrene. At the first introduction of this in Glendale, the ban on rigid and expanded polystyrene passed. We began our Burbank outreach in March of 2023 with 3 stakeholder engagement meetings. Great, thank you. 3 stakeholder engagement meetings. We conducted surveys at businesses using community-based social marketing techniques. We created an open dialogue when conducting surveys. We included social media, digital surveys, an updated City Plastic webpage, an online webinar, print flyers that contained QR codes, and we distributed in person and mailed out to the city's business license list, informational paper, and then we also held in-person meetings. In Glendale, we began our stakeholder engagement in December of 2023. And at the time, we were educating businesses on the newly passed polystyrene ban, and then also giving them information on the proposed new waste reduction regulations. We also did in-person surveys, held webinars, provided outreach materials, hosted in-person and virtual meetings with 5 different chambers and associations. We hosted a vendor fair, and we made a video on how to identify a compliant product. As you can see, the feedback we received was generally the same. The biggest concern we got from business owners was cost of compostables, cost of reusables. That was a huge concern. The second bit of feedback we got that was pretty ubiquitous was performance of compostables with very specific food products. Anything oily, saucy, liquid. They were very concerned that it would not hold up, especially for delivery and things like that. They also were concerned about space constraints. Burbank had additional concern about confusion of compostable plastics. Glendale businesses mentioned persistent post-COVID concerns. Some of these businesses, you know, when COVID hit, went to exclusively delivery, takeout, and some have never returned to pre-COVID standards of dine-in. They still have up to 80% of their business to go. So it's very important to them that the products perform when they're going out. There's also, since COVID, a sort of perception that disposables are more sanitary than reusables. So even if they have reusables for dine-in, customers will request disposable foodware items, especially utensils. All right, after the first round of feedback, we provided the city with reports, and they changed their ordinance regulations based on the feedback. As you can see, both of the cities added recyclable items for takeout and removed the 25-cent disposable cup fee. I should take a moment to point out that all compostable materials must be either certified or 100% fiber-based. And in order to be considered recyclable, the item has to be a plastic 1, 2, or a non-block 5, aluminum, paper, or cardboard. After all these changes were made, the ordinances were reintroduced, and Burbank's passed, and Glendale's did not. Burbank's intention was to support these businesses after the legislation passed, and that was well known. Our team was engaged to visit 400 food and beverage establishments after the regulations, and they gave it a really long runway. It passed in spring of 2024, and the full reusables don't go into effect until January 1st, 2026. So during that time, the city invested in having us go out to all these restaurants and really give them technical support, walk them through how to meet compliance, resources they can use for compliance, and then remind them of state laws and as well that they must be complying with at this time. We also offered a lot of the material in Armenian or Spanish, if that was necessary. We employed the CBSM technique of having all the products be end state and non-divisible, so we put stickies on the back of each sign so they could really slap them up right there in the moment. There was nothing they needed to do. And these were made by a great graphic designer, Christy Daly, and include an entire booklet of how to comply with the law. So both cities received the same strategy for outreach, but had 2 different sets of results. So what were our lessons learned? First, there is no accounting for politics. We don't really know what goes on in city councils. We can only know what we see. And in order to get our regulations over the finish line, we need to understand what would make city councils feel confident in passing the law. We now understand that the city council in Glendale would like to see more incentive programs for businesses, especially small businesses. Another difference to mention in the city is kind of an element of trust. There were a lot of feedback we got from Glendale businesses that felt kind of stymied by the zoned waste hauler system they have in Glendale, where they don't have any ability to choose their waste hauler. They felt like these were just additional regulations being put on them by the city. There's a lot of frustration and distrust. You know, my background before this, I actually, first half of my adult career, I was a sketch comedy performer and improviser out of Second City in Chicago. And there's a reason that all people think that improv is lame with all their trust falls. But there's a reason we do that, because in order to move anything forward as a group or a community, you have to have trust. And really, after really thinking about this, all I can say is that in Burbank, there was trust. Trust that this was right for the city, trust that there would be support for all the businesses, trust that this was the right thing to do in the city, trust that the city would have your back in this process. How you gain that? That's the thing we need to do a little bit more work on. So if you are a city or a local agency looking to introduce a single-use plastic policy, or you need help implementing it at all, please reach out. We can do a free consultation. Here is my info, and I'm happy to talk to you as well. And I'll take any questions. Thank you. So definitely both cities were more concerned about education than enforcement. And there will be fines similar to SB 1383 fines for not complying with edible food recovery. It's usually a 200, then a 500 fee, and you have 60 days to get it within compliance. But since none of the laws are truly in effect yet, with the exception of the polystyrene ban, we haven't seen any enforcement, and it is all complaint-based. Oh, yeah, the question is, how would the complaints be registered? And I'm sorry, I didn't repeat that first question. Yes, so this is about the complaint process for those of you on Zoom. The complaints are registered either with the 311 app in the city of Burbank or by contacting the Zero Waste email or phone number. Then they send a representative out to confirm the violation.
I was just wondering, what was the solution that you came up with the challenge of the sous-vide PV takeout techniques? Because I feel like that's something that all urgencies
That is a really tough one. Like anything hot and liquid. Hot and liquid is like the holy grail of finding something that is compostable that will hold it. There were kind of two issues there. One was that was really the main reason recyclables came back into play. So they could use these like a plastic number 5 to hold, as long as it's not black, to hold anything saucy or something like that. Another interesting thing that came up with that too is that there was a big Armenian community that didn't speak English. And I went out with an Armenian translator a lot in Glendale. We found out that a lot of places will have food spoilage if the container isn't clear plastic because they can't read the label. So they're opening the product to see what's in it, which ruins it, and then buying another sealed version of the product. So it really kind of moved to recyclables, not only for that saucy liquid thing, but also so people could see the contents and not have this consistent food spoilage issue on the shelves as well. But recyclables were the only answer we could think of, other than people bringing their own containers, which some people do for things like soup. There's also a waiver process too for hard to find items. Sorry, the acoustics are a little weird. Did you say the cost issue?
Yeah, how does the cost issue
Yes, they're thinking about doing some grants, some micro grants and things like that. After introducing the recyclable option, the cost issue did not seem that big of a deal to the city, mostly because now you have recyclable options, so we all know reusables will save you money. So they are now looking at these grants to offer to small businesses, especially some micro grants, but there have not been that many cost or money, financial incentives yet.
So you said that when you go back, you're taking the Oakland lessons and that.
I'm so sorry, repeat that?
You said you
Yes.
you going back to lessons.
Yeah, the question is the legislation did pass in Glendale. Are we going to be going back and doing more? That is the hope. Now that we feel like we have a good handle on what city council needs to get this over the finish line, city council is always looking at the balance between businesses and constituents, right? And it turns out whoever has the loudest voice is the one that's going to get their goals met when it comes to city council. So, yep. Hi. All right. Thank you.
All right.